Welcome back to the Chow Time Pod. It's your host, Red. I got another video today from Wheat Waffles. This is 4 reasons why promiscuity is leading to the downfall of society. And I 100% agree. I think for women, being promiscuous is creating a lot of issues for the next generation that women really do not realize what's going on. And this is Wheat Waffles explains everything very, very well. And hopefully the women that watch this can understand why men are telling you not to be this way. And it's not because we want somewhat because we want virgins and women with lower body counts. But it also affects the future and it affects you as women. So please like and subscribe down below. I really appreciate that. And let's get to the chow. It's chow time.
Promiscuity is rising. The percentage of 18 to 29-year-old women that have had 10 partners or more is at an all-time high at 17%, over 2 times higher than it was in 1989. Furthermore, for the same group, the percentage that have had sex with a stranger, in other words, from meeting a guy at a bar, club, or dating app, has increased from 20% in '88 to a staggering 60% last year. Now, this video isn't going to be explaining why we've seen a sharp rise in this data, because I already have a video explaining this for which there are 6 reasons. Instead, I'm going to be talking about the consequences of what will happen to society if these trends continue. And lastly, just so I'm not leaving you in suspense, I can tell you right away, things are not looking good for the future. If things carry on as they are, there will be very dark times ahead for the next generation of children, men, and most surprisingly, women as well. Anyway, let's get into it. Consequence number 1. The next generation of kids will face hardship. Study after study shows children born in single-parent households perform worse in just about every metric than those born in joint-parent households. They get worse grades at school, are less likely to do sports or extracurricular, are more likely to drop out, less likely to go to college, have lower employment rates, have lower paying jobs, have worse health and more health problems, are more likely to commit crime and end up in jail, more likely to divorce after getting married, and so on. In fact, the economic situation is so bad that almost half of children born to single mothers are currently living below the poverty line.
Half of the children that are in single mother homes are living below poverty line. Women, you are not thriving being single mothers. Most of you are not. It is 50%. I don't get why women really think that they can do everything by themselves. It was never like that before, and men have never even contemplated that in their heads before. But yet now that women have gotten more rights and more whatever, they somehow think that they can do that by themselves. How arrogant is that for you women to think this way?
Whereas only 13% of joint parent households are in the same position. Now, obviously, all of these problems are associated with kids being raised by single parents. But what does this have to do with promiscuity? Well, promiscuity, and in particular female promiscuity, leads to an increase in single-parent kids for 2 reasons. 1, it increases the number of women that get pregnant by accident. And then, if she decides to keep the baby with no man in place, she will be left to raise the child on her own. And 2, formerly promiscuous women are way more likely to divorce their husbands. 6-fold, in fact, from having 10 or more previous partners, compared to women that have had no premarital partners. And in these couples that end up divorcing where kids had already been born, it means the mother will now be left on her own to raise them. Anyway, of these 2 scenarios, I believe the first is way worse. because the child potentially may never meet his or her father at any stage of upbringing. And when this happens, it has a major negative impact on the child's life.
Yep.
Especially if it's a boy. The reason a boy misses out more is because he will have no father figure to look up to teach him how to be a masculine man.
Correct.
Whereas for a girl, she will always have her mother to teach her femininity. As for the second scenario, this is a little better, but still can be bad depending on when the divorce happens. If the parents split up when the child is close to 18, it should be mostly fine because the father was there for the majority of the years.
Yep.
But if it happens when the child was under 5, it's almost as bad as never meeting the father in the first place.
Damn.
Because the child has barely developed or had a chance to learn about the world. Anyway, what
Did not realize that it was that bad if they left at that age.
all of this goes back to the original point of promiscuity. By a mother choosing either to have a one-night stand unprotected or a wild past that makes her more likely to divorce, both increase the chance she'll end up as a single mother, which, as shown, impedes the quality.
I'm sure women in the comments are gonna be like, "Oh, why do you bring up the women? Why not men? Like, it takes two to tango." It does take two to tango. We're not saying it doesn't, but someone controls all of the access to sex, and it ain't men, right? So women choose to give men this amount of sex nowadays. It's not men's choices. Men love it. This is what men would prefer, but women are kind of screwing themselves doing it this way, right?
Of her child's upbringing. Anyway, that's the first point, and for the second consequence, the next group affected by female promiscuity is men. I will tell you though, this point is a little nuanced, because turns out if you are in the top 10% of men, you actually benefit from promiscuous women. However, if you are in the bottom 90%, you are almost certainly in a worse position. To explain, starting with the top 10%. They benefit because it's in men's evolutionary strategy to attract as many women as possible. In other words, spread their seed far and wide.
Yep.
And because they are in the top 10%, they will have no shortage of options, with women wanting them on a casual basis. And whether or not they actually end up getting these women pregnant, they will still at the least live a life of fulfillment, or at the very least one of recurring dopamine hits. What these men get to enjoy is abundance, variety and novelty because of their high standing position in mate value. Meanwhile, for the bottom 90% of men, they are almost certainly worse off when women embrace promiscuity. And the reason for this, put simply, is because dating is a zero-sum game. So when the top 10% of men capitalise on their abundance of women, it leaves hardly anything for the bottom 90%. In contrast, when monogamy is the presiding structure in dating, it leads to an equal distribution of men and women. So, in theory, it will mean every man has a chance no matter where he falls on the hierarchy. However, now promiscuity is rising, we are seeing less and less of this playing out.
Correct.
In fact, I've showed in these two videos more in depth the consequences.
I mean, how many women we know or, we see in our videos that are dating multiple men at a time, even sleeping with multiple men at a time while they're on their roster. That alone changes the whole monogamy thing. And I don't even think some of these women/men that have these big ass rosters can even commit to one person now after they've had such abundance.
Of when dating gets more competitive. Feel free to check them out afterwards. Anyway, that explains how the bottom 90% of men have it worse. Now moving to the next point, which sounds dramatic on first listen, but at the same time is not fantasy. And that is population collapse. For anyone who doesn't know, the birth rates in basically every Western country have been below 2 for the best part of the last 50 years. USA 1.7, UK 1.6, Canada 1.5, Italy 1.2, Germany 1.5, Australia 1.6. Now, if a population wants to sustain itself, the birth rate needs to be at least 2. This is because it takes 2 people, 1 man and 1 woman, to produce a child. And this is just to break even. If a population wants to grow, it needs to be more like 2.5 or 3. Which, coincidentally, this is the number of children women say they want. Which begs the question, why is there this large disparity between how many children women say they want and how many actually end up being born? Well, I believe promiscuity is partly to do with it. Allow me to demonstrate. 60 years ago, the average age of marriage for women was 20 on the nose.
Yep.
And after getting married, a woman would pretty much start popping out babies immediately. The birth rate was 3.5 at this time, so she would keep getting pregnant until she has 3, 4, or even 5 children. And because of health advancements, most of these children would grow to adulthood, so they can repeat the process and the population grows. However, nowadays things are far different. Today, essentially no women get married at 20.
No.
In fact, the average age is almost touching 30. Why? Well, a lot of modern women today now see their 20s as a time of exploration, studying, and discovery. Instead of raising families, they are hyper-focused on their education to set themselves up financially in the future. And because of this, a lot refrain from taking dating seriously in this time, and all wouldn't even entertain the thought of getting pregnant. However, once they reach their late 20s, early 30s, they start to realise time is running out, and they'll need to ramp up the level of urgency if they want to fulfil their goal of having 2 to 3 kids. Now ideally, she should already have a long-term partner in place by this point, so she can begin a family straight away. However, only half of the bell curve of women do this. The other half of women get married past the age of 28. This happens because I believe a lot of them had been snooping around dating casually in the last decade. So, for these women, if they still want children, they'll likely need to first spend the next 2 to 3 years searching for an adequate guy,
Correct.
taking her past 30, then spend another 2 to 3 years building a connection, finding if he's suitable long term.
Correct.
Now she's in her mid-30s, and given the time she has left, realistically, she will only be able to birth 1, at most 2, children. And then from this point, though she will likely have the financial potential to raise more kids, she can't because she's biologically locked out from doing so. To give some exact figures, a woman's...
This is exactly a big major issue, right? All these women think that you need a certain amount of money to be able to have kids, all this, which is true. I'm not saying it isn't. But time is of the essence, ladies. Sometimes you might not be financially stable to have kids yet, but you have kids. This is how a lot of people did it in their when they were getting married in their 20s. They just made it work, and they just didn't spend as much as women and men spend now. Like both men and women consume a crazy amount of products nowadays, especially women with all of the makeup and, you know, all of this beauty type products. It's crazy how much we're spending on these things when we can actually use this money to raise families. And we can do that right away. Just people choose not to. Well, mostly women.
Chance of conceiving plummets after 35 and is almost 0 come 40. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get here...
And this is what we talk about all the time, men, women, the wall. 30, your fertility starts dropping. Look at the dramatic drop right here, right? Boom. And at 40, yeah, you're almost guaranteed to not have anything. And women in their 40s still think that IVF or whatever stupid term is called, is still going to save them and get them children. I did a video on one that was 42 and still couldn't have children, so she had to adopt. Women, this is what the wall is. This is half of what the wall is. Fertility. At 35, the chances of you getting pregnant has dropped significantly already. Look at this. And not including your looks and to be able to attract the mate you want. So it's just... it's biological.
After this ordeal, the foundations of a huge problem have now been laid because when we zoom out and look at broader society, if every woman is doing this, or at least enough of them, it starts to lead to population collapse.
That's what
the
we're at right
first way
now.
to notice this happening is an inverted population pyramid, like South Korea already has, and where the consequences are starting to be felt. What consequences? Well, in the short term, it places a huge amount of pressure on all 20 to 60-year-olds who are working, as they now need to prop up the rest of society financially. They not only have to support their own lifestyles, but a bunch of extra people's lifestyles who are either over the age of 65 or below the age of 20, mainly through tax contributions. And this increased workload in turn leads to less babies being born, which only exacerbates the population decline.
Makes sense.
This continues until we reach in the long term the steady collapse of our populations. Anyway, that's the third reason. This leads me to my fourth and final point of how female promiscuity is bad for society, and that is it negatively affects women. That's right, women's self-inflicted actions impact them in a bad way. How ironic. Anyway, what are the main factors? Well, women who have promiscuous pasts are less happy in their marriages.
Makes sense.
So if they don't end up divorcing their husbands, they'll be feeling trapped and bored in their marriage. And part of the reason I believe this happens comes from the comparison mindset that develops after engaging in hookup culture. Or in other words, it leads to the grass is always greener thinking.
Correct.
And why do I believe this? Well, how many times have you heard a woman talk comparing all the guys she's slept with? It's a matter of
about
fact,
this all the time.
There's this one trend on TikTok where women do exactly this. They rate the quality of their previous partners out of 10 and finish by ranking them. And to be honest, I actually feel quite sorry for these women because when they eventually settle down and find a guy, they will have had so much prior experience to compare to that the probability their husband will be the best they've ever had will be extremely small. The data shows less than half of women report their best intimacy being with their husbands. How does that sound for a 40-year marriage? And in comparison, by default, 100% of women that have only ever had one partner will automatically have their husband as their best intimacy of their life. Another study I saw
100%.
shows all the direct negative concerns men and women feel after having a casual hookup. Here we see large disparities in numerous factors. 40% of women fear regret, while only 25% of men do. 40% of women find it dissatisfying, as opposed to 30% of men. Over half of women are concerned about their own personal safety, when only a third of men are.
Damn, more than half are concerned with their personal safety, but yet still sleep around willy-nilly and where these men could kidnap or murder you. Damn, okay.
In fact, in this data, women have greater concerns in 12 out of the 14 factors, which shows again that casual intimacy for men isn't a big deal, but for women it is, and they've got a lot more to evaluate for whether it'll be worthwhile or not.
Correct.
Anyway, I hope this shows how for when it comes to casual intimacy, it is scarcely leading to positive outcomes. Least of all for women, and that's most surprising. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you press the like button and leave any thoughts or points I've missed in the comments below, as it all...
How was that, Chow? I always hear the opposite of, oh, we're overpopulated. There's so many of us anyways. We need to kill each other off. And when you actually look at the real numbers, you're being lied to. We're not overpopulated. We're actually underpopulated, and we're declining. And that is the number one factor of a fall of a civilization, is population collapse. Again, there won't be enough people, younger people, to take care of that many older people. It just can't happen. So, I mean, all the other factors are big too, but the population collapse is a lot of people argue that we're overpopulated. We're really not. So, please like and subscribe down below. I really appreciate that, and I'll catch you guys next time. Ciao, time.